Hey everyone, and welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be jumping into the world of French homophones and homonyms. Those tricky words that sound the same but have different meanings. It can be a real headache for French learners.
Well, absolutely.
Especially if you're aiming for something like the certificate offered through Pronunciator's Library module.
It's a crucial skill to master.
It is crucial. And I think what's interesting is that it's not just about memorizing word pairs. It really is kind of a window into how the French language has evolved over time.
Absolutely. It's like these words are little linguistic time capsules, giving us glimpses into how pronunciation and meanings have shifted over centuries.
Oh, I love that. It's like we're going on a linguistic treasure hunt today.
Exactly.
Uncovering hidden connections within the language.
And who knows, maybe by understanding these connections, we'll unlock some of the trickier aspects of French grammar as well.
That would be amazing. Well, I'm ready to put on my detective hat and dive into some examples. We've got a whole bunch of homophones and homonyms to explore, and I'm kind of curious about the ones that even seasoned learners find tricky, those common culprits that can trip anyone up.
Yes, the classic stumbling blocks. Let's start with a pair that's notorious for causing confusion. And These two little words are everywhere in French, and while they sound identical, they play very different grammatical roles.
Yeah, I can see how those could be confusing, especially for someone who's maybe just starting out with French. Can you break down the difference for us?
Of course. So a without the accent is the third person singular present tense of the verb avoir, meaning to have. So you would use it in a sentence like, il a un livre, which means he has a book.
Okay, so in that context, a equals has. What about with the accent?
With the accent, on the other hand, is a preposition that usually translates to or at in English. So you would use it in a sentence like, il va à la bibliothèque, meaning he is going to the library.
So that little accent mark makes a world of difference. It's like a tiny signal flare guiding us toward the correct meaning.
Precisely. And mastering this distinction is essential not just for speaking correctly, but also for understanding written French.
I imagine mixing them up could lead to some pretty funny misunderstandings.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine saying he has the library instead of he's going to the library.
That would definitely raise some eyebrows. Speaking of potential mix-ups, let's move on to another pair that often causes headaches. Leur and leur. I remember wrestling with these two for ages.
These are tricky because they both relate to possession, but in slightly different ways. So leur, without the S, acts as an indirect object pronoun in English. For example, je leur donne le livre, meaning I give them the book. Notice how leur refers to the people receiving the book, but it doesn't indicate ownership.
Okay, so leur is about who's getting something, not who owns it. What about leur then?
Leur, with the trace, functions more like a possessive adjective, similar to their in English. So you would use it to say, ce sont leurs livres, meaning these are their books. In this case, leur directly indicates ownership.
So it's all about whether we're talking about the recipient of an action or the owner of something. A subtle but important difference.
Exactly. And this distinction is particularly relevant when you're trying to express yourself clearly and accurately in French, especially in written communication or formal settings.
It's like choosing the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb, right?
Precisely. Each word has its specific function, and understanding those functions is key to mastering French grammar.
And speaking of tools, let's move on to another pair that can be a real brain teaser. Ou and ou. These two are notorious for sounding identical, yet their meanings couldn't be further apart.
That's right.
Oh yes, ou and do.
Oh.
These two have definitely tripped me up before.
I understand the feeling. It's all about recognizing those subtle visual cues. Ou, without the accent, simply means, or in English, offering a choice between two options. So you might say, voulez-vous du café ou du thé? Meaning, would you like coffee or tea?
Okay, so ou is for choices. But what about ou with that sneaky little accent mark?
Ou, with the accent, means where, asking for location. You'd use it to ask something like, où est la boulangerie? Meaning, where is the bakery?
I see. So it's like the accent mark acts as a little compass pointing us towards a place.
That's a great way to think about it. And mastering the difference between these two is crucial for navigating your way around, both literally and figuratively, in the French language.
It's amazing how such a tiny mark can completely change the meaning of a word. It's almost like a secret code within the language.
It is quite fascinating, isn't it? And it underscores the importance of paying attention to the details in French, even the seemingly insignificant ones.
Well, I'm feeling more and more like a linguistic detective with every word pair we uncover. This is definitely a great reminder to keep my eyes peeled for those subtle but crucial distinctions.
Absolutely. And remember, these distinctions become more intuitive with practice. The more you encounter these word pairs in context, the more easily you'll be able to decipher their meanings and use them correctly.
Great advice. And for those who are really looking to test their mastery, I'd highly recommend checking out Pronunciator's library module. It's a fantastic way to put your knowledge to the test and earn that coveted certificate.
Indeed. It's an excellent resource for anyone who wants to delve deeper into the nuances of French grammar and pronunciation.
Well, we've covered some essential groundwork here, but we've only just begun our deep dive. There are many more fascinating homophone and homonym pairs waiting to be explored, and I can't wait to unravel their mysteries with you.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of French homophones and homonyms. We're ready to tackle some more tricky word pairs, and, I think you'll be surprised by the insights we uncover.
I'm ready for more. So where are we headed next on our journey through the French language?
Let's take a look at a trio of words that often cause confusion for French learners. La, and la. These three little words sound exactly the same, but they each have a distinct meaning and grammatical function.
Oh, yeah. I can definitely see how those could get mixed up. They're like linguistic chameleons blending into the sentence and changing their meaning depending on the context.
That's a great analogy. Let's start with la without the accent. It functions as a definite article meaning the when referring to a feminine noun. So you might say la maison est grande, which means the house is big.
Okay, so la equals the in that case. Pretty straightforward, but I have a feeling it doesn't end there.
You're absolutely right. La can also act as a direct object pronoun, meaning her in English. For example, in the sentence, je la vois, meaning I see her, la replaces the feminine noun her to make the sentence flow more smoothly.
Wow, so la is a multitasker.
Yeah.
It's both the and her. I guess it's all about paying close attention to how it's being used in the sentence.
Exactly. Now let's move on to la with the accent. This word is an adverb that translates to there in English. You'd use it to point out a specific location, like in the sentence, le livre est là, meaning the book is there.
So la helps us pinpoint things in space. It's like a linguistic GPS guiding us towards the right spot.
I love that. And finally, we have la, which is a contraction of la or la, and the auxiliary verb est, meaning has. So you might encounter it in a sentence like il l'a vu, meaning he has seen it or he saw it.
Okay, so la is a bit of a time traveler taking us back to a past action. It's like a tiny snapshot of something that has already happened.
That's a great way to put it. And, mastering these subtle distinctions is particularly important when you're preparing for the pronunciator certificate exam. The exam often tests your ability to differentiate between these sound-alike words in various contexts.
That's a great point. It's not just about understanding these words in isolation, but also about being able to apply them correctly in different situations.
Exactly.
So the difference between knowing the rules of the game and actually being able to play it well.
Exactly. And just like with any game, practice makes perfect. The more you expose yourself to these word pairs in authentic contexts, the more easily you'll be able to navigate their nuances.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more confident about tackling la and la now. But before we move on, I'm curious about another grammatical concept that often trips up learners, choosing between d'avoir and d'être in the passé composé. Can you shed some light on this for us?
Absolutely. This is a fundamental concept in French grammar, and it's essential for forming the past tense correctly. D'avoir, which means to have, is used with most verbs in the passé composé. So if you wanted to say, I ate, you would say, j'ai mangé.
Okay, so d'avoir is the go-to auxiliary verb for most past tense constructions. Mm-hmm. But what about d'être? When do we use that one?
Être, meaning to be, is used with a special group of verbs that often describe movement or a change in state. These are sometimes called verbs of motion or reflexive verbs. For example, if you wanted to say, I went, you would say, je suis allé, using d'être as the auxiliary verb.
It's fascinating how different verbs pair up with different auxiliary verbs, the past tense. It's almost like a dance, with each verb having its specific partner.
I love that image. And just like in a dance, there are certain rules and patterns to follow. Mastering these patterns is key to forming the passé composé correctly. And it's also a key skill that's tested on the pronunciator certificate exam.
So it's not just about knowing the definitions of devoir and det. It's about understanding when to use each one and how they interact with different verbs in the past tense.
Precisely. It's about seeing the bigger picture and understanding how the pieces fit together.
And speaking of pieces fitting together, let's move on to another pair of homophones that often cause confusion. Ça and ça. These two little words can be sneaky, but with a little bit of practice, you'll be able to tell them apart with ease.
That's right.
I'm ready to conquer ça and ça. Bring on the challenge.
All right, let's start with ça. This word is a demonstrative pronoun that often translates to that or this in English, but here's the catch. It usually refers to something general or unspecified, kind of like a vague pointer. For example, if you say ça va, meaning how are you? You're not referring to a specific object or situation. It's more of a general inquiry about someone's well-being.
Okay, so ça is a bit of a wild card, pointing to something that's not clearly defined. What about ça then?
Ça, on the other hand, is a possessive adjective that means her or his in English. It's used to indicate ownership, just like my or your. So if you say sa voiture rouge, meaning her car is red, you're clearly specifying who owns the car.
So ça is about general things, and ça is about ownership. I'm starting to see a pattern here. It seems like a lot of these homophone pairs involve subtle shifts in focus or grammatical function.
That's a very astute observation. You're absolutely right. And that's why mastering these word pairs is so crucial for developing a deep understanding of French grammar and expressing yourself with precision. It's about going beyond simple vocabulary recognition and delving into the nuances of how these words work within sentences and contexts.
It's amazing how much depth and complexity we can find in these seemingly simple word pairs. It really is like peeling back the layers of the language and discovering hidden connections.
I completely agree. And the more we explore, the more we realize just how rich and fascinating the French language truly is.
Well, I'm feeling inspired to keep digging. There are so many more homophones and homonyms to discover, and I'm eager to learn more about the secrets they hold.
And I'm equally excited to share them with you. We've still got plenty more to uncover in our deep dive, so stay tuned for part 3, where we'll continue our linguistic adventure.
Welcome back, word detectives. We're on the final leg of our deep dive into French homophones and homonyms.
I know I'm excited.
Ready to tackle some more of these tricky sound-alikes.
Absolutely. And I think the word pairs we're about to explore will really highlight how understanding these homophones and homonyms, it's not just about avoiding mistakes. It's about unlocking like a deeper level of fluency and appreciation for the language.
Oh, I love that. So it's not just about passing a test. It's about truly mastering the nuances of French.
Exactly. It's about developing an ear for those subtle distinctions that make French so rich and expressive. And speaking of subtle distinctions, let's dive into a pair that often causes confusion. Plus and plus.
Ah, yes, plus and plus. They sound almost identical, but I have a feeling their meanings are quite different.
You're absolutely right. So plus is the past participle of the verb pleuvoir, meaning to rain. So you'd use it in a sentence like il a plu toute la nuit, meaning it rained all night.
Okay, so plus is all about the weather. What about plus then?
Plus is a bit more versatile. It can act as an adverb, meaning more, like in the sentence je veux plus de chocolat, meaning I want more chocolate.
I think we can all relate to that sentiment, but I'm guessing plus has another trick up its sleeve.
You're a quick study. Plus can also mean no more, depending on the context. For example, you could say, je ne veux plus de devoirs, meaning I don't want any more homework.
So plus can add or take away depending on how it's used. It's like a linguistic plus or minus sign.
That's a fantastic way to think about it. And mastering these different uses of plus is crucial for expressing yourself clearly and accurately in French. It's one of those words that pops up constantly, so the more comfortable you are with its various meanings, the more fluent you'll sound.
I imagine this is also a key concept tested on the pronunciator certificate exam.
Absolutely. The exam often presents sentences with plus and asks you to determine its meaning based on the context. So being able to recognize those subtle cues is essential for success.
This is a great reminder to pay attention to those little details that can make a big difference in understanding French. Okay, I'm feeling ready to tackle another word pair. What's next on our list of linguistic challenges?
Let's explore conseil and cassé. These two are tricky because they look very similar and relate to the same concept, but they have different grammatical functions.
Oh, I can see how those could be confusing. It's like they're trying to trick us with their similar spellings.
Exactly, but don't worry, we'll break it down. Conseil with an L at the end is a noun meaning advice or counsel. So you might say, j'ai besoin de tes conseils, which means I need your advice. Or, le conseil municipal se réunit aujourd'hui, meaning the city council is meeting today.
Okay, so conseil is a thing, either a piece of advice or a group of people. What about conseil with an E at the end?
Conseil with an E is the third person singular present tense of the verb conseil, which means to advise. So you would use it in a sentence like, elle me conseille de bien dormir, meaning she advises me to sleep well.
So conseil is an action, the act of giving advice. It's like the verb version of conseil.
You got it. And being able to differentiate between these two is crucial for understanding French sentence structure and using the right word form in different grammatical contexts.
It's like knowing which puzzle piece fits where. You wouldn't want to force a square piece into a round hole, right?
Exactly. Each word has its specific place and function in the sentence. And mastering these distinctions is what separates intermediate learners from truly advanced French speakers.
This is definitely motivating me to keep practicing and refining my understanding of these nuances.
And remember, practice doesn't have to be boring. You can find fun ways to incorporate these word pairs into your learning routine. Watch French movies, listen to French music, or even chat with French speakers online. The more you immerse yourself in the language, the more naturally these distinctions will come to you.
Great advice. And speaking of immersion, I'd recommend checking out Pronunciator's library module if you're really serious about mastering these homophones and homonyms. It offers a variety of interactive exercises and activities that can help you solidify your understanding and test your skills in a fun and engaging way.
It's an excellent resource, especially for those who are aiming for that certificate. It provides a structured and comprehensive approach to mastering these tricky word pairs.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the world of French homophones and homonyms. We've learned about their different meanings, their grammatical functions, and how mastering them can unlock a deeper level of fluency and appreciation for the French language. It's been a real pleasure. And for all our listeners out there, keep those ears sharp, those minds curious, and those dictionaries handy. Au revoir and happy learning.